God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program. Thank you so much for joining me. In today's working series video, I want to discuss the current state of what passes for political discourse in terms of the Overton window. First, a brief on the Overton window, just in case you haven't heard of it. It is a political theory that originally attempted to explain why an idea is politically successful. Today, the term is used to say accepted political speech or political ideas that are socially acceptable. The Overton window is always shifting. At the founding of the United States, it was an unquestioned assumption that slavery would persist in the new country. It was considered so extreme a decision to question slavery that condemnation of the practice was edited out of the Declaration of Independence. 100 years later, and slavery had been abolished in the United States. In more recent years, the sexual revolution drastically pushed the boundaries of the Overton window. Before that revolution, all young people were expected to stay celibate, or at least have a very small number of sexual encounters before they married for life. Divorce was exceedingly rare, and abortion was nigh unthinkable. Today, all three of those commonplace practices have been obliterated. Young people are expected to have sex at earlier and earlier ages and have more and more sexual encounters, and abortion is all but assumed to be here to stay. Many commentators in the political sphere lament the current state of political discussion, from going down with the ship American liberals like Dave Rubin to the libertarian Freedom Tunes channel. It never fails that, given any topic, venue, or volume of people, there are just as likely to be two parties shouting vicious epithets at each other as parties having a constructive conversation. I used to think that this was because the Overton window was so large that it included people whose ideology was so far to one extreme or the other that everyone else was extreme by comparison. But Tim Pool said something in a recent video that was the aha moment for me. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, that there are people fighting to shut others out of the Overton window. Now, here's how it seems to me that the story has unfolded from about the 1960s to the present day. The left, that does not embrace objective truth, has pushed the Overton window to the largest it has ever been. This has allowed the left to be very successful politically, after securing a great deal of political power, more than the left has had since before World War II. They sought to shrink the Overton window. If they can shut their opponents out of acceptable political discourse, then they can monopolize power for generations. So the left began to try to convince people that certain beliefs were bad. They had an easy time of it at first. They were quickly able to convince people that, quote-unquote, overt racism and sexism are bad. And let me be clear, I am not disagreeing with the statement that racism and sexism are bad. I'm simply observing a historical trend. They found, the left being, that with little arm twisting, they could convince people that quote-unquote homophobia and quote-unquote xenophobia are also bad. But once these ideas, racism, sexism, homophobia, and xenophobia, had been driven from the Overton window, the left realized that somehow a great multitude of ideas they did not like were still considered acceptable by society. So the left decided that they would try to attach these four labels to as many policies as possible. For several years, they found some success with this method as well. Not as much as before, but they were able to drive some of their opponents' ideas out of the Overton window and also squeeze some of their fringe ideas inside. Think about the epithets hurled most often: racist, sexist, Nazi, fascist, so on and so forth. These are ideas that are socially unacceptable. It is outside the Overton window to be racist. Racist ideas are unsuccessful in today's political climate. No one in the mainstream is making public speeches where they call black people demeaning or disgusting names and talk about how much better white people are than black people. Well, there is, but again, they are an unsuccessful segment of the political discussion. The inverse might be a discussion for another time, but you can repeat these statements for sexism, Nazism, and fascism. If ideas can be successfully nailed to one of these unacceptable ideologies, perhaps even including homophobia and xenophobia, it can be defeated without ever arguing its merits. For example, look to New York City's now discontinued stop and frisk policy. This policy gave the police authority to detain and search anyone on the street acting suspiciously. Concurrent with the implementation of stop and frisk, crime rates in the city plummeted. It is widely believed today that the practice is unconstitutional because it was disproportionately used against non-whites. That is to say, it was racist. But for the last 4 years or so, the left has been unable to effect any change in the scope of the Overton window. They have not changed any part of their strategy or execution, yet their success has slowed significantly. In some spheres of the culture, it has even ground to a halt or reversed course. This has caused desperation to arise in the ranks of the left, and as their progress continues to flounder, this desperation is begetting hysteria. This is simply the situation as I see it. I am not making an observation on whether or not the events as they have played out are right or wrong at this point. I'm simply sharing with you my perception of events. Is there a problem here? If there is, how should it be fixed? Now, I would love to hear your thoughts on this, and if you don't mind, pause the video now, leave a comment down below, and then continue. I'll give you a moment. Are you done? Here are my thoughts. I think that there is a problem. It's not one of speech in and of itself. Free speech is not the problem. It is the accuracy of the speech. Now, this brings us to a discussion that I don't intend to fully explore here. Perhaps it should be the subject of a future video. That discussion is on the trade-offs of free speech, and are they dangerous? I believe nearly absolutely in free speech. I believe that people have the legal right to say almost anything, even if that means telling a lie. Now, let me be clear on what I mean when I say a lie, because the word has been conflated to mean some things that I don't agree with. A lie is the purposeful spreading of false information, and in my opinion, ought to be a societal taboo. Not illegal, but socially unacceptable. The accidental spread of false information, again, in my opinion, should have a societal disincentive in place that encourages people to do as much work as they can to ensure the information they spread is true, but it should not be considered the same thing as telling a lie. Now, in an ideal world, the people that lie would be punished by society for so doing, but the world we live in today does not do this. Because people can get away with lying or spreading false information without condemnation from their own team, this practice is widespread. But something happens when lying becomes commonplace. Those who think of themselves as desiring of truth will, to a greater and greater degree, ignore the rhetoric and arguments of the people they consider to be liars, even when those people are telling the truth. This is ultimately why vicious epithets have become so commonplace. Society at large considers itself to be desirous of the truth, as access to the information that used to be gatekept by corporate media grows and grows. More and more people realize that they are being sold a heap of lies on this issue or that politician. Softball lies and false information that used to work are no longer believed. So a harder and harder hitting lie must be told. It is no longer enough that this policy of the enemy or that law of the enemy is racist. Now the people that stand behind those laws must be racist as well. And then very rapidly it became no longer enough that a politician or a commentator was racist. Now their rank and file supporters must be branded as racist as well. This is a desperate, hysterical attempt to nail these unacceptable labels and policies to people that the left wants forced out of the Overton window. They don't want to have to bother with arguing the merits of these policies. They only want them to go away. And as time marches on, we see that the left becomes more amicable to the idea of getting rid of or fundamentally changing the election process to give themselves a better chance of winning, to try and tip the scales such that the people have less say in elections than they had in the past. This is my working theory on what is being called by some the culture war, what is being called by myself, and I think myself alone, the war for the Overton window. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Come back next time for more content in the future. Until next time, good night and God bless.